Hello, and thanks again for joining me for Third Act Stories. And I'm going to be all over the place today because I've got kind of a crazy subject that I don't really know where I'm going to go with it. I mean, I've got a little Jupiter 2 flying saucer here in front of me, which is not what this is about. Actually, it's about growing up in the 60s, which is sort of what this whole blog is about. Blog, whatever you call it. So I was digging through some old comic books. I'm a comic book illustrator, so I've kept a lot of comics from when I was growing up and things that I enjoyed and things that I appreciated the artwork in them. And, you know, one of them was Mangus Robot Fighter. Just throw that at the camera. That guy was crazy. He was just this guy in the future from 4000 AD. And apparently in 4000 AD, there's robots running around everywhere. Not nice robots like this one, but nasty robots. Nasty robots that had agendas which no one can really know what a robot's agenda is. But they were running around causing people trouble, and Mangus apparently had the ability to run up to them and punch them in the face and knock them out. So that was one of my fun comic books. Another comic book was Weird Science, and you got all kinds of weird stories in Weird Science. Wally Wood, who was an artist back in the day, I'm still a big fan of Wally Wood. You see it in some of the stuff I do. But another one was UFO stories. Flying saucers, UFO flying saucers. Of course, then on the back you win great prizes and get cash back in a flash. I mean, everything when I was growing up was fun, it was entertainment, and all this stuff was entertainment. This was entertainment. It was designed to be something fun and outlandish for you to see or read about or enjoy on a hot summer's afternoon while you got your feet up and you've been swimming or fishing or something, and then you read a crazy comic book. But they were all entertainment. I'm a big fan of having fiction in my science fiction. I'm not such a big fan of having real robots running around and the government talking about UFOs and all this kind of crazy stuff. That takes all the fun out of it. Because when you start talking about all this stuff and making these things, you know, I mean, life, it distracts you from life. It distracts you from the fun stuff. And I try not to get too deep into a lot of that kind of stuff. You know, I follow it and try to figure out what it is. You know, one of my thoughts on, I wrote some little notes down here, some thoughts. You know, this UFO stuff that you see coming out all the time, or UAP, what they call them now. The government's talking about it. The president's talking about it. You're getting videos of these things. You got people who worked and back engineered them and had aliens that they dealt with and all this kind of stuff. I don't believe any of it. I'm not saying I don't believe something's going on, but I don't believe it's, you know, people from Alpha Centauri or something. I don't think that's what it is. I mean, if you think about it, and unfortunately I've probably thought about it more than I should, that stuff's been going on forever. If you go back and look at what were little green men back in the 1500s? Well, that was fairies, what they called fairies. And, you know, if you read those stories, they read a lot like, you know, abduction stories from these UFO things from the 50s. You know, aliens are little green men. So how do you know if they're fairies or aliens? The other thing is, you know, you go into religion, you go check out stuff like, I'm a big fan of this one. I've read this book cover to cover many times. And if you go look into the Holy Bible, you look in Genesis 6, and you may or may not be a follower of the Bible, but for me, it's got a, I mean, like I say, I've read it back and forth several times, many times, read it every day, and I don't find anything in it that's not true. And you could argue that, and I'd be happy to argue that with anybody if you want to put stuff in the text or in the comments. We can go back and forth on that. But I try not to go back and forth constantly on those comments. I try to answer folks' questions, but I don't want to turn it into a he said, she said thing. But Genesis chapter 6 says, and this is back prior to the flood, prior to Noah. It said, and it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and that they were fair. That means good looking. And they took themselves wives of all of which they chose. The sons of God took wives. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. When the sons of God came into the daughters of men, you know what that means. And they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And I think that that's talking about Gilgamesh. You know, the writers of the Bible knew Gilgamesh, I'm sure, and Hercules and all those things, because if you go and look in mythology, Gilgamesh, Hercules, they were all the offspring of God's little g that came down and had relations with human women. You know, Zeus and Diane produced Perseus. Zeus and Leda produced Helen of Troy. And then Hercules' mother was a human that I can't pronounce. But Zeus again was the father, which apparently he got around. And God saw that the wickedness of men was great in the earth, and that every imagination, the thoughts of his heart were evil continually. Yeah, like we don't know that. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man who I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping things, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Angered me, I guess. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. And I think what that means is Noah was perfect in his genetics. Sorry, the allergies today. His genetics were what was making him somebody worth saving. And God was going to wipe out the planet because the gene pool had gotten polluted by these angels having interactions with human women. You know, if you look at what they're trying to do with CRISPR and all this kind of stuff, it's you know, they're trying to do that again today. You know, Jesus said the end of the world will be like the days before Noah. You know, he also goes on to say that people were getting married and drinking and having fun and all this kind of stuff, and then the flood happened. So, you know, I think he's saying that all this weird stuff's going on, but people don't seem to notice it. So that's kind of what's going on today, right? If you go and look at Ezekiel talks about, you know, a lot of people say that it's talking about a flying saucer. He always describes it a wheel within wheels. And if you look at the artist descriptions of that, it's a very complex geometric thing. But if you ask me, that is a wheel within a wheel. Doesn't that look like a wheel within a wheel? Kind of spinning around. You can kind of see it spinning around there. Anyway, but you don't know what it was. You don't know if it was a flying saucer, or that's the way they presented themselves. I guess you can tell, I think that if aliens are anything, they're what, you know, we used to call angels and demons. That we used to call them that up until the 1940s, and then after we dropped the bomb and everything was all cool about, oh, we're all into science and everything. Now they're from another planet and they fly mechanical ships and all this kind of stuff. So that's what we believe. So then we started calling them aliens. But it's the same thing. It's been going on for generations and generations. And, you know, I think it's the same thing. You know, you go to look at Deuteronomy 38, 8-9. I'm not going to read all that. You can read it. But it talks about how the sons of God, he ends up putting them in charge of all the different nations, and there's a different God associated with the nations. You know, that to me is where you get stuff like Zeus and you know, all the Greek gods. You get the Mesopotamian gods. You get all the Hindu gods. You get, you know, I mean, Thor, I guess. You know, I think all this stuff's tied together pretty tightly. I think the universe is a lot more complicated than we think it is. It's got a lot more going on. This blog is not about UFOs. It's not about, I'm not even, preaching in this thing here. What I'm trying to do is give you guys a good advice as to how to deal with this sort of thing. You can enjoy the stuff you grew up with. It was fun. It was fantasy. It was storytelling. And nowadays, they start talking about UFOs or something like that. Just put it in the category of somebody's lying to me. Either the government's lying to me, or the angels and the demons are lying to me, whatever. The truth of the matter is, the fun thing to do in your 60s is not to worry about that kind of stuff, not to worry about robots running around. You got to go out and have fun with your friends. This weekend, I spent time with a couple of buddies of mine. They came up and we went out to a Corvette show. It was rainy, it was nasty. I was going to shoot video of it, but I wanted to focus on having fun, and that's what I did, and spending time with my buddies. So we walked around and looked at Corvettes. I have a Corvette. I'll talk to you about that later. But I have a Corvette in my 60s here, and I love driving it. It's convertible. I take it out on the weekends or any day I feel down. I don't feel down that often, but if I feel a little like, hey, I want a real boost, I get out in the Corvette, take the top down, drive around, fresh air. It's great. That's what you do with your life. You figure out something. If you like fishing, you go fishing. If you hang out with your friends, you like bowling, go bowling. If you like bowling and your butt can handle it. But the week before that, this is the reason why this blog's a little late. The week before that, I went up to see my daughter in Seattle, and we had a great time. We went running around all over Seattle. We went to some of the islands. I had the best fish and chips I've ever had in my life at a place called Proper Fish. If you want the best fish and chips, it's on Berkshire Island, I think. It is so good. Proper Fish. I mean, a piece of cod that big. It was so good. I can't tell you how good it was. They have an Asian market over there that has all the greatest stuff in the world. It's beautiful. It's cool out. We went walking. We put like 6.5 miles into a arboretum and went walking around there and just sat around and talked about dumb stuff and had fun. That's what life's about in your 60s. Hang on those connections you've got with the friends you've got, the family you've got. Spend time with them. Enjoy the outdoors. If you got a chance to go muzzle loading and shooting your rifle, or if you just want to go hunting or fishing, that's the fun stuff. The UFO stuff, don't pay attention to any of the damn UFO stuff. If the UFO aliens start showing up, punch them in the face. No, you don't even have to punch them in the face. Just tell them Jesus says, get out of here, and they'll leave, from what I understand. That stuff was fine in the realm of fun and fantasy. The real world is more fun. So that's my 2 cents on that. Let's see, what else could So my daughter and I are talking about robots, right? This robot's not going to ever do anything. He just hangs out. He blinks. He's fun. He reminds me of something that I enjoyed when I was a kid. But, Elon Musk said, wouldn't it be great if you had your own personal C-3PO? Well, we were sitting out, my daughter and I were sitting out watching the people walk by, and it was drizzling out. And I'm thinking, what if every one of these people had I don't want to use a colorful expletive, but a C-3PO with them. And they're all going, oh my, help me, and they're in the grocery store. Ooh, 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 ooh. I was like, that would not be a world I want to live in. Hopefully Star Wars will never sell the rights to C-3PO to Elon Musk, because if those things start walking around talking like that, I am going to go insane. Anyway, just have fun. Enjoy. If you build flying saucers, then you can build them. That's fun to do. But, I just don't fill my life with anything that's got any kind of real weirdness to it. I like stuff that has faux weirdness. Fictional weirdness is great. Real weirdness, let that stuff go. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. If you've got 3 cents, please be sure and send it to me, because I like to have an extra cent every once in a while. Y'all have a wonderful and exciting summer coming up here. It's getting ready to go into summer. Enjoy that. Get outside. Have fun. And we'll see you next time on Third Act Stories.